Aaron Carter, a project manager in his late 40s, has always prided himself on his ability to see through people, to detect the subtle hints that most others miss. He had built his career on being thorough, on noticing the things that didn't quite fit, and solving problems before they spiraled out of control. At work, his team respected him for his analytical mind and calm demeanor. He was the one who kept everything on track, the one who always had a plan. But lately, something in his personal life had felt off. Aaron had been married to Lena for almost 15 years. She was a journalist, a bright spark with an infectious laugh and a way of lighting up any room she entered. They were once the kind of couple friends envied, complimenting each other in almost every way. Lena's spontaneous, carefree nature balanced Aaron's pragmatic, methodical approach to life. They seemed like a perfect match, at least on the surface. Yet Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At first, it was the little things. Lena's phone, always glued to her hand, now spent more time face down on the counter. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting away from him mid-conversation, as if she were somewhere else entirely. Her laughter, once so effortless, seemed strained, almost forced. And then, there were the sudden, unexpected changes in her routine. She had recently taken up a new fitness regimen, waking up at dawn to attend sessions with Nolan, a fitness trainer she spoke about with a little too much enthusiasm. Aaron wasn't a jealous man by nature. He knew Lena had always been friendly and outgoing, that she liked meeting new people and trying new things. But this time, something felt different. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it gnawed at him. A few weeks ago, he'd dismissed it as paranoia, but now it was harder to ignore. One day, as Aaron took out the trash, he saw it, a small white stick poking out from under a pile of crumpled receipts and tissues. His heart quickened as he picked it up, a pregnancy test positive. He stared at it, his mind racing. Lena had once confessed she wanted kids, but they had agreed to wait. Last year, he had undergone a vasectomy after a long conversation where they both agreed that they were content with the life they had, just the two of them. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. He felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. How could this be? How could Lena be pregnant? It couldn't be his. He knew that much. The signs he had been ignoring, the unease that had been building up inside him, suddenly had a name. Betrayal. Aaron decided not to confront Lena immediately. He knew that jumping to conclusions could backfire. Instead, he chose to bide his time, to watch, to wait. He needed to understand what he was up against, needed proof. He went through the rest of his day as if nothing had happened, but inside, something had changed. The foundation of trust he had built his life on had started to crumble. He started paying closer attention. Whenever Lena left for her morning workout with Nolan, he noted the time. He watched her as she carefully packed her gym bag, noticed the extra time she spent getting ready, the way her hand lingered over her phone before slipping it into her pocket. He began to monitor her social media, looking for any small slip, any sign that might confirm his suspicions. At work, he was distracted, his thoughts constantly drifting back to Lena, to Nolan. Who was this man who had suddenly become so important to his wife? What kind of hold did he have over her? Aaron felt anger boiling inside him, but he kept it at bay, determined to keep his cool. He began taking steps, methodically. He needed to gather evidence, to know for sure before he made his move. He knew how to investigate, how to piece together a puzzle from the smallest of clues. It was, after all, what he did best. One evening, while Lena was in the shower, he quietly retrieved her phone. His hands were shaking as he scrolled through her messages. There were no messages from Nolan, but that didn't surprise him. He knew people who were hiding something wouldn't leave the evidence in plain sight. It was when he saw a small, rarely used app at the bottom of the screen, an app she never mentioned but had recently downloaded, that he knew he was onto something. A private messaging app, with no conversations logged. Aaron's heart was pounding now. He felt a rush of adrenaline as he quickly took pictures of the screen with his own phone, careful to leave everything exactly as he found it. He needed to be meticulous, patient. He needed to make sure she had no idea he was on to her. That night, lying beside Lena in their bed, Aaron felt a cold distance between them that he had never felt before. She slept soundly, unaware of his racing thoughts, his newfound resolve. He watched her for a long time, feeling both love and resentment. He wondered how they had gotten here, to this place of secrets and suspicion. Aaron knew he had to act. He wasn't going to be a fool, wasn't going to be played. But he would do this smartly, quietly. He would find out the truth, and when he did, he would be ready to take everything from her, everything she had tried to take from him. He thought about his next move, his plan forming in his mind. He would start by transferring the money, moving it where she couldn't touch it. Then, he would begin the process of filing for divorce. But first, he would gather evidence. He needed concrete proof. He needed to see it for himself. And when he did, there would be no turning back. Aaron spent the next week in a state of hyper-awareness. Every glance, every smile Lena gave him felt like a test. He found himself studying her expressions, her body language, and even her voice for any sign of deceit. Lena, seemingly unaware, continued her routine as if nothing had changed. She was warm and affectionate. But Aaron noticed a new tension in her posture, a flicker of nervousness in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. He couldn't tell if it was guilt or something else, but it was there, lurking just beneath the surface. He continued to keep his suspicions to himself, but every morning when Lena left for her sessions with Nolan, his stomach churned with a mixture of dread and anger. He had done some digging online and found Nolan's social media profiles, pictures of him in various poses, his smile cocky and self-assured. He was younger than Aaron by at least 10 years, with the kind of athletic build that Aaron could never hope to achieve. It felt like a punch to the gut, seeing this man who had seemingly entered their lives out of nowhere. And now, Nolan was a threat to everything Aaron had worked for, everything he had loved. That weekend, Aaron decided it was time to take his next step. He installed a small GPS tracker on Lena's car, hidden under the dashboard where it wouldn't be noticed. He had read enough stories about cheating to know that this was the kind of thing people did when they were suspicious, but it still felt surreal. Was this really his life now? Was he really spying on his wife? On Monday morning, he waited until she left for her usual workout, then quickly opened the GPS app on his phone. As expected, the car headed to Nolan's gym, but it didn't stop there. Aaron's eyes widened as he watched the small dot move past the gym and into a quieter, more secluded part of town. He followed the route on the map, heart racing. The car finally stopped at a small residential address he didn't recognize. He zoomed in on the map, memorizing the street name and house number. He felt his breath catch in his throat. What was Lena doing there? His mind spun with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. He needed to know, but he couldn't just show up and confront her, not yet. He needed more proof. That evening, Aaron found a pretext to leave the house. He told Lena he had an important work call to take, one that could last a few hours. She barely seemed to notice, too busy typing away on her phone, her smile distracted. Aaron wondered if she was messaging Nolan, planning their next meeting. As soon as he was out of sight, he drove straight to the address he had seen on the GPS. He parked a block away, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing. The house was small and nondescript, with a neatly kept garden and a single car parked in the driveway. Nolan's car. Aaron felt his stomach tighten. He sat there for what felt like hours, his eyes fixed on the front door, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Finally, he saw it. The front door opened, and there she was, Lena, laughing softly, her hand resting lightly on Nolan's shoulder. She looked happier than she had in months, her face lit with a brightness he had not seen in a long time. Nolan leaned in, whispered something in her ear, and she playfully pushed him away. Aaron's blood ran cold. It was all the confirmation he needed. He felt a surge of anger, hot and consuming, burning away the last remnants of doubt. They were together, here, in this place. He wanted to get out of the car, storm up to them, and demand answers. But instead, he took a deep breath and forced himself to stay put. He couldn't lose control, not now, not when he was so close. He pulled out his phone and began taking pictures. He needed evidence, something concrete. He watched through the camera lens as Lena and Nolan lingered on the porch, sharing a lingering touch, before finally stepping inside. Aaron snapped another picture, his hands trembling. It felt like an eternity before they finally re-emerged. This time, they were closer, more intimate. Nolan's arm was around Lena's waist, and she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. Aaron took more photos, his heart hammering in his chest. He felt sick to his stomach, a mix of fury and heartbreak twisting inside him. He waited until they went back. Inside, before driving away, he needed to clear his head, to figure out what to do next. He parked in a deserted lot, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence. His mind was racing, spinning with thoughts he could barely keep up with. He thought about confronting Lena, about throwing the evidence in her face and demanding an explanation. But then he remembered the plan he had set in motion. The money, the divorce. He needed to stay calm, to play this out strategically. That night, when he returned home, Lena greeted him with a warm smile and a kiss. Aaron felt a cold fury bubbling beneath the surface, but he smiled back, pretending everything was fine. He felt like he was wearing a mask, playing a role in a play he wanted no part in. He had to keep up the charade a little longer. Over the next few days, he began moving money from their joint accounts into his own private accounts. He made small transfers, nothing too large or obvious, something that wouldn't raise alarms. He spoke with a lawyer, initiated the paperwork for divorce, made sure everything was in place. He felt a grim satisfaction, knowing he was taking back control, preparing for the moment when he would confront Lena with the truth. Aaron also started digging into Nolan's background, looking for anything he could use to ruin him. He found some information, nothing concrete yet, but enough to give him hope. A few suspicious transactions, a vague connection to a business that had gone under in questionable circumstances. He knew there was something there, something he could use. All the while he kept up his act. He continued to smile, to pretend everything was normal, to kiss Lena goodnight and tell her he loved her, even as his heart twisted with betrayal. He felt like he was living two lives, one of deception and one of painful reality. But he would endure it, he told himself, for just a little longer. He watched Lena closely, waiting for her to slip up, for her to give him an opening. He knew it was coming, knew she couldn't keep up her charade forever. And when she did, he would be ready. He would have everything he needed to make her pay. Aaron's world had become a maze of lies and hidden agendas, but he had grown accustomed to navigating it. He spent his days at work, going through the motions, his mind always half elsewhere, always on Lena and Nolan. The mask he wore had become almost second nature, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a calm voice that belied the storm inside him. One Thursday evening, everything changed. Aaron came home earlier than usual, having wrapped up a meeting ahead of schedule. As he walked into the house, he noticed an unfamiliar pair of sneakers by the door. His heart skipped a beat. He knew those shoes belonged to Nolan. He had seen them on his social media posts, in photos of him at the gym. The sight of them, right there in his home, was like a punch to the gut. His hands clenched into fists. His breath quickened. He felt a rush of anger that almost knocked him off balance. He could hear soft murmurs coming from the living room. Lena's voice mingled with Nolan's, light and playful. Aaron's stomach twisted. The audacity of it, the sheer disrespect, made his blood boil. He moved quietly, not wanting them to know he was there, and crept toward the living room door, which was slightly ajar. Peeking through the crack, he saw them. Lena was sitting on the couch, her back to him, her body language relaxed, almost flirtatious. Nolan was standing close, too close, his hand on her shoulder, fingers gently massaging her skin. They were laughing, sharing a moment that was too intimate, too familiar. Aaron felt a wave of nausea rise in his throat. He pulled out his phone and recorded the scene, his hands trembling. He needed proof, something undeniable, something that would show her for who she had become. As he watched, Nolan leaned down, his lips brushing against Lena's ear as he whispered something. She giggled, a soft, intimate sound that Aaron hadn't heard in months. That was the breaking point. Without thinking, Aaron pushed the door open, letting it swing wide with a loud bang. Lena jumped, startled, her eyes wide with shock as she turned to see him standing there. Nolan straightened up, his face turning from surprise to a smug smile that only fueled Aaron's rage. "What the hell is this?" Aaron's voice was calm, almost too calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, every muscle in his body tense and ready. Lena stood up quickly, her face flushing. "Aaron, you're home early." Her voice was shaky, her eyes darting between Aaron and Nolan. She was trying to think of an excuse. He could see it in her eyes, but there was nothing she could say that would erase what he had just seen. Nolan, on the other hand, didn't seem flustered at all. He crossed his arms, a cocky grin spreading across his face. "We were just talking, Aaron. No need to get worked up." Aaron felt a wave of anger surge through him. "Talking? In my house? While I'm at work? How long has this been going on, Lena?" His voice was rising now, no longer calm, the hurt and betrayal clear in every word. Lena took a step back, her face pale. "Aaron, please. It's not what you think." Aaron laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Not what I think? Really? You think I'm that stupid?" He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Nolan's. "I've seen the messages. I've followed you. I know what's been going on, and I'm done pretending." Lena's face crumpled. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Aaron felt nothing but cold fury. He had loved this woman, trusted her, built a life with her, and she had betrayed him right under his nose. "How could you do this to me, Lena? After everything we've been through, everything I've done for you?" Aaron's voice cracked, the pain finally breaking through the anger. "How could you?" Lena's tears spilled over, but her voice was defiant. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Aaron. I swear. It just did. I was lonely. You were always so busy with work. I felt like I didn't exist anymore." Aaron's jaw clenched. "So this is my fault now? Because I was working to provide for us? To build a life for us?" Lena shook her head, her hands trembling. "No, I'm not saying that. I felt lost, Aaron. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Aaron turned to Nolan, his eyes blazing. "And you," he spat. "What's your excuse? What did you think would happen? Did you think I'd just roll over and let you take what's mine?" Nolan shrugged, his smile fading, replaced by a smirk. "Lena deserves better than a man who's too busy for his own wife. Maybe you should have paid more attention." Aaron's vision blurred with rage. He felt his fists clenching, every fiber of his being wanting to launch himself at Nolan to wipe that smug look off his face. But he knew better. He had always been a man who thought 2 steps ahead. He wouldn't give Nolan the satisfaction of losing control. Instead, Aaron took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He looked at Lena, his voice steadier now, colder. "I've already started the divorce proceedings. I'm done. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." Lena's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Aaron, please don't do this. We can fix this. We can— No, Lena. Aaron cut her off, his voice firm. You can't fix this. It's too late. He turned his gaze back to Nolan. And as for you, don't think this is over. I know things about you, Nolan. Things that could ruin you. So, I suggest you get out of my house before I decide to act on them. Nolan's smirk faltered, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. He hesitated, then turned to Lena. Come on, let's go, he said, his voice less confident. Lena stood frozen for a moment, then looked back at Aaron, tears streaming down her cheeks. Aaron, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but Aaron had heard enough. He turned his back on them, walking out of the room without another word. He felt the weight of the betrayal, the finality of it, pressing down on him. He had lost everything he thought he knew, but at least he still had his pride. At least he still had control over what came next. As he closed the door behind him, he heard Lena's muffled sobs, heard Nolan muttering something in a low voice. But he didn't care anymore. He was done being a fool. He had seen the truth, and now he would act. He walked down the hallway, his mind already turning to the next steps. He had a lot of work to do, papers to sign, accounts to close, and a future to build without the woman who had shattered his heart. For the first time in weeks, he felt a strange sense of calm, a clarity that came from knowing exactly where he stood. Lena had made her choice, and now he was making his. He would move on, find a new life, a better life. He would make sure of it. Aaron spent the next few days processing the fallout from the confrontation. The shock had worn off, replaced by a simmering determination. He had made up his mind. He wasn't going to let this betrayal destroy him. He would take control of his own destiny, and he would make sure both Lena and Nolan faced the consequences of their actions. He knew he couldn't do this alone, though. He needed someone who had just as much to lose, someone who could match his resolve. That's when he decided to reach out to Hannah, Nolan's wife. He had seen her a few times at the gym in passing, a tall woman with an air of quiet confidence. He wondered how much she knew about her husband's affair, if anything at all. Aaron hesitated before dialing her number, but his resolve hardened with every ring. When she finally answered, her voice was calm, almost aloof. "Hello, this is Hannah," she said. He cleared his throat, unsure of how to begin. "Hannah, this is Aaron Carter, Lena's husband." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. He could sense her apprehension, the slight intake of breath that suggested she knew who he was. "Yes, I know who you are. What do you want?" "I think we need to talk," Aaron replied, choosing his words carefully. "It's about Nolan and Lena." Silence. He waited, giving her time to digest his words. When she finally spoke again, her tone was sharper, edged with suspicion. "What about them?" Aaron sighed. "I'm afraid they've been having an affair. I have proof. Photos, messages. I thought you should know." There was another long pause, but this time he could hear her breathing quicken, could sense the shock she was trying to contain. "Where can we meet?" she finally asked, her voice now taut with tension. They agreed to meet at a small cafe in the outskirts of town, a place where they wouldn't be easily seen. When Aaron arrived, he spotted Hannah immediately, seated at a corner table, her face pale, her fingers tightly wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked up as he approached, her eyes narrowing with a mix of suspicion and pain. Aaron sat down, offering her a tentative smile. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." She nodded, her expression guarded. "I need to hear what you have to say, and I need to see that proof." Aaron wasted no time. He pulled out his phone and handed it to her, showing her the photos he had taken of Lena and Nolan at the house, the way they touched, the intimacy that was undeniable. He showed her the screenshots of the messages he had found, messages that left no room for doubt about the nature of their relationship. Hannah's face hardened as she scrolled through the images, her hands shaking slightly. He could see the devastation in her eyes, but also a flicker of something else. Anger, determination. She set the phone down on the table and looked directly at him. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice steady, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "A few weeks," Aaron replied, feeling a strange kinship forming between them. "I've been gathering evidence, trying to figure out what to do. I thought, maybe we could help each other." Hannah nodded slowly, processing his words. "What do you have in mind?" Aaron leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've been digging into Nolan's background. There are some suspicious transactions, connections to a business that went under in questionable circumstances. I think we can use this. We expose him, ruin his reputation, maybe even get him investigated for fraud." Hannah's eyes lit up with a spark of interest. "And Lena?" Aaron's mouth tightened into a thin line. "I've already started the divorce process. I've moved the money, set things in motion. She'll have nothing left when I'm done. I want her to see what it feels like to lose everything." Hannah leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "And you think this will make it all better? Destroying them both?" Aaron shrugged. "I don't know if it'll make things better, but it'll make things right, at least for me." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "All right, Aaron, I'm in. Let's do this." Over the next few days, Aaron and Hannah worked together, exchanging information, plotting their next moves. They shared a common goal now, united by the pain their spouses had inflicted on them. Hannah used her connections in the fitness world to dig deeper into Nolan's dealings, finding more evidence of his shady transactions, while Aaron tapped into his contacts in finance, piecing together a case that could potentially bring Nolan down. The tension between them was palpable, a mixture of anger, sadness, and a newfound alliance. As they met late at night in quiet cafes and secluded parks, Aaron began to see Hannah in a different light. She was sharp, resourceful, and just as hurt as he was. They shared stories of their marriages, their regrets, their doubts. Slowly, a bond began to form, a fragile connection built on shared betrayal and a need for closure. One evening, they decided it was time to put their plan into action. Hannah had managed to get a meeting with a journalist who specialized in financial crimes, someone who could help bring Nolan's activities to light. Aaron compiled all the evidence they had gathered into a comprehensive dossier, ready to hand over to the reporter. They met with the journalist at a small bar downtown, a place where they wouldn't draw attention. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened intently as they laid out their case, flipping through the pages of evidence with growing interest. "This is quite the story," she said finally, looking up at them. "If what you're saying checks out, this could be a major scandal. Are you sure you're ready for the fallout?" Aaron and Hannah exchanged a glance. "We're sure," Aaron replied firmly. "He deserves it. They both do." The journalist nodded, slipping the dossier into her bag. "I'll get to work on this, if there's anything else you find. Let me know." As she left, Aaron felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with fear. They were doing this. They were really doing this. He turned to Hannah, a slight smile playing on his lips. "You know, I didn't think I'd ever be working with someone like you." Hannah smiled back, a little sadly. "And I never thought I'd find myself in this position. But here we are." They stood there for a moment, the weight of what they were doing settling over them. Aaron felt something shift inside him, a sense of release, of letting go. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he was moving forward, like he was taking back his life. In the days that followed, the journalist began to dig deeper into Nolan's financial dealings, and soon enough, the story broke. Headlines splashed across news sites about Nolan's alleged involvement in financial fraud, his reputation taking a nosedive overnight. The gym that had once been bustling with clients became almost deserted. Nolan was under suspicion, his every move watched, his every action questioned. Aaron watched with a grim satisfaction as the man who had tried to take his wife now faced the consequences of his actions. It was a small victory, but it felt good. He knew there was still more to be done, still more healing needed, but he had taken a step, a decisive step, towards reclaiming his life. As for Lena, she found herself increasingly isolated. The divorce papers had been served, and Aaron had moved out, taking everything he could. Her attempts to contact him were met with silence, her pleas ignored. She had lost her husband, her lover's reputation was in tatters, and she was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered world. Aaron and Hannah continued to meet, more frequently now. They shared more than just plans for revenge. They shared moments of laughter, of quiet understanding. Slowly, a new relationship began to form, tentative, unsure, but real. They were both scarred, both broken in their own ways, but they were moving forward together. And in that, Aaron found a sliver of hope, a glimmer of light breaking through the darkness. Aaron sat on the porch of his new home, staring out at the horizon as the sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. It had been weeks since the story of Nolan's financial fraud hit the news, weeks since Aaron had signed the divorce papers and moved out of the house he had shared with Lena for so many years. Yet, instead of feeling empty or lost, he felt lighter, free in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. He thought back to the day the news broke, how he had watched the fallout unfold with a mix of satisfaction and relief. Nolan's reputation had been ruined, his clients abandoning him, his gym empty. Lena, on the other hand, had tried to fight back, pleading with Aaron to reconsider the divorce, using every tactic she could think of: tears, apologies, even the news of her pregnancy. But Aaron had remained resolute. He knew the pregnancy wasn't his. He refused to be manipulated. When Lena's mother called him, urging him to think about the baby, he remained calm but firm, explaining that he had already made his decision. He was done with the lies, the betrayal, the deceit. It was time for him to move on. At first, Lena had tried to convince him that they could work things out, that they could start over. She even showed up at his new place one evening, looking desperate, her eyes red from crying. Aaron had listened, his expression unreadable, his heart hardened by everything she had done. "I'm sorry, Lena," he said finally, his voice quiet, but firm. "I can't do this anymore. We're over. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. It's time for us both to move on." Lena's face crumpled, and she sobbed openly, pleading with him. "But I need you, Aaron. I made a mistake. I was lost, confused. I didn't mean to hurt you." Aaron shook his head, feeling a pang of sorrow but not regret. "I'm not the person you need anymore, Lena, and honestly, I don't think you're the person I need either. I deserve better than this, better than lies and betrayal, and so do you." She had left that night, defeated and broken. Aaron watched her go, feeling a mixture of pity and relief. He had loved her once, deeply, but that love had been poisoned by deceit. It was time to let go, to stop clinging to the past. He had done what he needed to do, and now he could finally breathe. In the days that followed, he found himself growing closer to Hannah. Their meetings, once focused solely on their shared quest for revenge, had become more relaxed, more personal. They talked about their lives, their dreams, their fears. They laughed together, comforted each other, and slowly began to heal. Aaron realized that, in Hannah, he had found someone who understood his pain, someone who had been through the same hell and come out stronger on the other side. One afternoon, they decided to meet at a local park. The air was crisp, the leaves a vibrant mix of reds and oranges. They walked along the path, their conversation light, easy. Aaron felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of calm, of peace. "I never thought I'd be here," Aaron said, glancing at Hannah with a smile. "Not just here with you, but here in general, starting over." Hannah nodded, her own smile mirroring his. "Me neither. But sometimes life takes you places you never expected to go. Maybe it's not about where you end up, but who you end up with." Aaron chuckled softly. "Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe this was meant to happen in some strange, messed-up way." They sat on a bench, the sun warming their faces. Aaron turned to Hannah, his expression more serious now. "Do you ever think about what's next? What we're going to do now?" Hannah shrugged, her eyes thoughtful. "I think about it all the time. I'm not sure what's next for me, but I know I don't want to waste any more time on people who don't deserve me. I've been through too much to settle for anything less than what I deserve." Aaron nodded, feeling a deep sense of agreement. "Yeah, I feel the same way. I've spent so much time being angry, being hurt. I just want to live now, to be happy." Hannah smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "Maybe we can figure it out together." Aaron looked down at their hands, entwined, and felt a warmth spread through his chest. "I'd like that," he said softly. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, talking about their dreams, their hopes, and the new possibilities that lay ahead. Aaron felt lighter, freer. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking back with regret. He was looking forward, to a future that felt wide open. A few days later, Lena sent him one final message. It was brief, almost formal, a simple apology and a wish for him to find peace and happiness. Aaron stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. He didn't need her apologies anymore. He was ready to move on. He had started to build something new with Hannah, something that felt real and grounded. They were both cautious, aware of the scars they carried, but they were also hopeful. They had both been broken by betrayal, but now they were finding their way back to themselves, together. As Aaron sat on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a sense of closure. He had come through the storm, had faced the worst, and survived. Now he was ready to start over, to build a new life, one without lies, without deceit, but filled with honesty, love, and a newfound sense of purpose. He turned his gaze toward the future, feeling the cool breeze on his face, and smiled. He didn't know exactly where the road would lead, but he knew he wouldn't be walking it alone. And for the first time in what felt like forever, that was enough. He stood up, walked inside, and closed the door behind him. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. With Hannah by his side, he was ready to embrace a new beginning.